Hi there, I'm Jen, this is Remembered Reads, and this is going to be the supermarket shopping book tag. This tag was created by Jason from Byways in Bookland, and I was tagged by Courtney Ferreter. I will link to both of their videos below. Jason's video I think is unavailable right now, but maybe it's just privated. I don't know, I'll include the link either way. And these are questions, I believe, about how you choose books. I haven't prepared, so we'll see how this goes. Question number 1 is list. Before going shopping, including virtually, do you have a list? And my answer is kind of complicated because I don't buy most of my books first off. I usually read books from the library and then I choose to buy them later. So when I choose to buy them later, I generally am looking specifically for that book if it's something that I'm going to have to buy new or online because it's something that's out of print. So then I obviously am going in search of that particular book, so that would be a yes. However, when I'm just traveling around, I do go into bookstores for no reason. I don't generally buy things, although I sometimes do. And I guess I sometimes have a list of books in my head that I might buy. And again, generally, if I happen to see a book that I read previously from the library and think I want to own and I see it in a bookstore, I will pick it up. But that's not technically with a list, that's just something I have in mind. So I don't have a real answer to this question. Question number 2 is fruit and veg. Good for the body and mind. Recommend a book that you feel improved your mental and physical health. I think the book that I'm going to recommend is a bit of an odd one. I think this was... I don't even know if this came out from a major publisher or if it was self-published. It was called Becoming the Supple Leopard, and it was by the guy who has the YouTube channel Mobility WOD, or Workout of the Day, kind of inspired by the CrossFit Workout of the Day, but it is specifically mobility work, so stretching type work. And I think it's great to think about stretching from the perspective of a more structured workout, because I think stretching is often presented as a side thing or else as a kind of exclusively a mind thing in the case of yoga. So I think it helps to think about it from a more general fitness perspective, not as a side thing, stretch a little after you run or weightlift or whatever, but no, stretching should be a thing on its own. And I think that's important for the body and mind, because if you have a strong body, that helps your mind, right? I feel like that's the thing people talk about now with COVID, because a lot of senior citizens aren't getting exercise, and that results in mental degradation. So I don't know if that made sense, but yes, Becoming the Supple Leopard by the Mobility WOD guy. I'll look up his name and include everything below. Question number 3 is tinned goods. Regardless of the label on the can, the contents are often too bland. That rhymes. What's your tin can genre? I think my tin can genre is that kind of business self-help that I tell these stories all the time. I spent 8 years at a corporate type job, and we regularly had team building events where you had to read and then discuss one of these businessy self-help books of the What Color Is My Parachute, Who Moved My Cheese, Strength Finders variety. And they are all pretty much the same. They could all be one chapter, and instead they're all long books. Yeah, they're like a tin can. They have a purpose in the same way that a can of tuna has a purpose, but, you know, are any of them really different? Not really. Question number 4 is meat and fish counter. Prepared by a skilled butcher / fishmonger, just how you want it. Tell us about a book that you feel was written just for you. I think anybody who's on BookTube, regardless of the size of your channel, you eventually get somebody who's self-published a book trying to sell you on your book. And most of the time they do a terrible job and it's nothing you'd want to read. But years ago, when I hardly had any subscribers even, I had someone offer to send me his book, and I actually read the whole description because it sounded semi-interesting, and it was a mystery, and the main character is a disfigured First World War veteran, and eventually in the end, as with a lot of mysteries, they go off and have this big action scene, but in this one, when he has the we're getting the band back together moment, it's all of his disabled veteran friends getting together and doing this, which is exactly the kind of thing that I enjoy reading. You know, I love the First World War. That sounds terrible. I'm a First World War buff. I love the First World War, it just sounds wrong. I enjoy mysteries. I like seeing disabled and disfigured characters with agency and non-cliché, so this was checked a lot of boxes for me, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was called The Bad Canadian by Len Mokos. Yeah. And genuinely, it was the only time that any self-published author has ever suggested to me that I read a book and it was something that I was actually interested in, and it was super on brand for me. Question number 5 is baked goods. Bread is a staple for many around the world. Who is an author you can easily digest at any time of the day? I guess my answer has to be Garth Ennis, because I read a lot of his stuff. He writes war stories, he wrote Preacher, he wrote The Boys, he wrote the beginning section of Crossed. I think somebody else took it over, but he's great fun, and I love his war comics especially. If I were in the other room, I'd hold up my Absolute Preacher editions again. Question number 6 is Chilled section. Recommend a cool new author you recently discovered. This isn't super recent, but last year I started reading Adam Pottle's work. He is a Canadian author. This is his memoir, Voice on Writing with Deafness. A lot of his work does deal with either deafness or disability. Last year, when I first picked this up, I also picked up a poetry collection of his, Beautiful Mutants, which is great, a novella of his, The Bus, which was excellent. It was one of my favorite things that I read last year. And I went and saw a play called The Black Drum that he had written, which is a sign language musical, so not a musical that was written in a spoken language and then translated into a sign language. It was written in ASL, and all of the music is bass-based, so you can feel it through, so there's no singing, but there's drumming, and there's that kind of reverberation, so you can feel it through the seats. So it's something that is designed for a deaf audience that certainly anyone can watch, but I thought that was brilliant because there's a big difference between making a pre-existing musical accessible and doing something like that. So, and anyway, I've enjoyed all of his work. He had a children's book come out this year, but there's been some controversy about the art, which isn't his work. The publisher assigned an artist to the story, so that's disappointing. He's actually asked people not to purchase that because some of the art is apparently stereotypical. I haven't seen it, but I mean, good for him telling people not to purchase his book. So. Question number 7 is Frozen section. Tell us about a book that gave you the shivers. The creepiest book that I've read in years, over the past few years, I think, was Samantha Schweblin's Fever Dream, which is just the creepiest thing. I was reading that. I was at my gym in Houston, where I did a lot of my reading when I was there, and it was so disturbing that I felt like I needed to go home to read it and not be reading it in public because it was so creepy. So, yeah, that is definitely, it's very atmospheric, it's weird. It's one of those books where you don't really know what's going on. It's almost literary horror, I guess, but yeah, super creepy. Question number 8 is Beers, Wines, Spirits. Name one of the first books that made you feel like an adult. Alright, I have to reach back to my old mass market paperbacks. Weird 12-year-old me was super obsessed with Tom Clancy books, like Patriot Games, Clear and Present Danger. No, that hadn't come out yet. Patriot Games and The Hunt for Red October. And I always felt very adult if I was reading one of these in public. Again, I was a weird child. Question number 9 is sweets/candy. What genre or author is your indulgence when you need a little treat read? I guess my indulgence is franchise fiction. I enjoy reading Mass Effect and Dragon Age tie-in books. So, yeah. Some of the Star Wars tie-ins as well. Most of those things, they're not necessarily great literary quality, and you know that. Although, I've been surprised by some of the authors that they've had working on some of those franchises lately, so they are trying to do something with a lot of those, I guess. Although, the restrictions that are on some of them. Anyway, that's a whole different discussion. I made a video about franchise fiction. I'll link to that below if you care to hear me talk about that. If not, just ignore me. Question number 10 is magazine stand. If you read magazines or journals regularly, share some titles. Right now, the only magazine that I'm getting is Canadian Running, and that's only because I don't even remember what, one of the runs during the summer, and part of the race package was you got a year's subscription to Canadian Running, so that's all I have. Magazines are incredibly expensive here. When I lived in the US, I got Dolls International, Gundog, and Yoga Journal. In part just for the novelty of magazines being so cheap, because here it costs a fortune. And in terms of magazines that I read that I didn't actually subscribe to, my sister subscribes to The New Yorker, The Atlantic, and Walrus. Walrus is essentially a Canadian version of The New Yorker or The Atlantic. It's the same kind of content. And when she comes to Toronto, or when I would go out to Calgary, I would get her old copies of it, but obviously we haven't been able to travel this year, so I haven't read any of those for a year. Question 11 is checkout. Time to go home and unpack. Tag some shoppers on their way in. I'm going to tag the last person who commented on my last video. As of the time when I am filming this, the last video I posted was the coffee table book one, so let me look that up. And that was Anna the Joyful Reader, so you're tagged if you want to be. If not, no pressure. And as always, if you're watching this and you would like to be tagged, please also consider yourself tagged. Alright, that's it for now. Ciao.